The Last Great Race. Table of Contents. A musher and sled dog team in the wilderness. Introduction. It's hard to imagine anyone wanting to travel almost 2,000 kilometers or 1,242 miles across the Alaskan wilderness in the dead of winter. It's even harder to imagine someone doing it behind a sled pulled by a team of dogs. Yet every year since 1973, dozens of men and women have participated in what is known as the last great race on Earth. The race, better known as the Iditarod, starts in Anchorage, Alaska on the first Saturday in March. It is without a doubt one of the most grueling sporting events ever held. The inspiration. In the winter of 1925, a terrible disease called diphtheria struck the town of Nome on the central coast of Alaska. Diphtheria, which usually attacks children, is caused by bacteria that infect the lungs, suffocating the victim. It can be treated with an injection or serum, but during the harsh winter, Nome was running out of the serum. Doctors in Nome sent an urgent plea to the city of Anchorage asking for more. Someone suggested they send the serum by plane, but flying was dangerous in 1925. The planes of that time could not cope with a fierce storm that was raging. Instead, the serum was loaded on a train and sent northward to Nome. Unfortunately, the train tracks ended about 1,100 kilometers or 683 miles short of the town, the dog team in Nome. The only way to cover the remaining distance was by dog sled. A musher or sled driver loaded the serum from the train and traveled to a village or house where he passed it to another musher. The next musher passed the serum to another musher at a second village or house, and so on all the way to Nome. Thanks to the brave mushers, Nome children were saved. Do you know? The lead dog of the sled team that arrived with the serum in Nome in 1925 became famous. His name was Balto, and he was the subject of many news reports. Balto even went on tour throughout the United States and Canada with other dogs from his team. He eventually retired to the Cleveland, Ohio Zoo and died in 1933. Today, school children have begun a campaign to return Balto's preserved body to Alaska. History. The 1925 journey demonstrated how important dog sledding had once been for the people of Alaska. But by 1967, dogs were being replaced by snowmobiles, cars, and trucks. Two Alaskans, Dorothy Page and Joe Redington Sr., wanted to do something that would help save this 6,000-year-old tradition. Dorothy, an Alaska history buff, and Joe, a dog breeder and musher, decided to hold a sled dog race along the Iditarod Trail, a route created during the Alaskan Gold Rush. The trail got its name from Alaskan Native Americans who called the surrounding hunting area Iditarod, or the distant place. The route of the first race was 90 kilometers, 56 miles, and took only 2 days to complete. Dorothy Page. In order to attract mushers, Joe and Dorothy raised $25,000 in prize money. This was enough money to get 58 mushers to enter, but the next year the race was canceled because the mild winter led to a lack of snow and a lack of interest. Another race was held in 1969, but organizers could only raise enough money for a $1,000 prize, and only 12 mushers entered. But the lack of interest did not discourage Joe Redington Sr. He was determined to make the race longer and more challenging. In 1973, he extended the route to around 1,800 kilometers, 1,100 miles. It now stretched from Anchorage to Nome and was the longest sled dog race in the world. Joe managed to increase the prize money to about $50,000. In 1973, 35 mushers entered the first official Iditarod. It took the winner 20 days to complete the race, and the last place finisher reached Nome 12 days later. And that's Joe Reddington Sr. The route. The trail taken by the mushers carrying serum in 1925 only covers about half of today's northern Iditarod race trail. The current trail uses two routes, the northern and the southern, which split off for about 500 kilometers or 300 miles in the middle of the race. On even-numbered years, mushers take the northern route, and on odd-numbered years, they take the southern route. The official opening of the race is a bustling ceremony in Anchorage. The dogs make a ceremonial run from Anchorage to Eagle River. Then the dogs are trucked to the official start in Wasilla. This way the dogs are not competing on the dangerous city streets of Anchorage, and they do not have to cross the treacherous Cook Inlet. The busy start in Anchorage. The Iditarod Trail, Alaska. Jeff King, Iditarod champion in 1993, 1996, 1998, and 2006. Not every team starts at the same time. Instead, teams take off at 2-minute intervals to prevent teams from running into each other. The difference in time are erased at the required 24-hour stop, where officials hold the teams back for a few extra minutes. Since the race takes over a week to complete, there are 26 checkpoints along the route where mushers and dogs can rest. Before the race begins, mushers send dog food and other supplies to the checkpoints so they will not have to carry them on the trail. The average distance between checkpoints is 74 kilometers or 46 miles, longer than the entire 1967 race, and the greatest distance between checkpoints is 150 kilometers or 93 miles. Off they go. The dogs can keep a steady speed of about 19 kilometers per hour or 12 miles per hour for about 4 to 6 hours before they get tired. This is usually long enough to get from one checkpoint to the next, but the dogs also rest on the trail, so the mushers don't always stop at every checkpoint. In order to keep the teams on course through the trackless wilderness, the trail is marked with orange stakes and reflective tape. Additional markers are set up in the mountains and along the coast. Each year the volunteers set out about 12,000 stakes. Getting lost could cost a musher his or her life, so it is important that the trail be well marked. The Iditarod Trail is filled with some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. It crosses the Alaska mountain range at a gap known as Rainy Pass, though during the Iditarod it is more likely to be a snowy pass. The trail also follows the Yukon River valleys and travels along the coast of the Bering Sea before reaching Nome. Along the way it passes through thick forest and over frozen tundra. The teams must cross frozen streams and rivers, which can be deadly if the ice is too thin. Wild animals, such as moose, have been known to attack and kill dogs, and racers can encounter fierce storms with Arctic winds and driving snow. Rainy Pass, the highest elevation on the race trail. The trail ends in the small city of Nome. During the winter, the sun rises for only a few hours a day, and the race is a welcome celebration for the residents. Citizens of Nome line the streets to watch the finishers come in. While 55 to 75 mushers usually start, every year several drop out because of sickness, injury, or simple exhaustion. Today, winners of the Iditarod usually complete the race in 10 to 12 days. The record time of 8 days, 18 hours, and 46 minutes was set in 2011 by John Baker. There can be a full week between the times when the first and last mushers cross the finish line. Do you know? During the early days of dog sledding, a red lantern was hung outside a checkpoint to help the musher find shelter. The lantern remained lit until the musher arrived. Today, a red lantern is hung over the finish line of the Iditarod. The lantern is lit at the start of the race, and the last musher to cross the line puts it out. The mushers. Mushers come from all walks of life. They include professional athletes, tradespeople, authors, doctors, teachers, and lawyers. Since 1974, both men and women have competed in the Iditarod. 2 women have won the race. One of them, Susan Butcher, has won 4 times. Do you know? Since 1986, the Iditabike race has been held alongside the Iditarod Trail. In this 322 kilometer or 200-mile race, a hardy group of mountain bikers rides over the snow and ice, braving sub-zero temperatures and strong winds. While many are Alaskans, mushers come from all around the world. They come from many of the 50 states and from Canada, Russia, Norway, Japan, New Zealand, Great Britain, and Italy. To enter the Iditarod, a musher must be at least 18 years old. He or she must have competed in a previous Iditarod or 2 qualifying races of at least 805 kilometers or 500 miles in the previous 2 years. Sled dog racing is a solo sport, and all mushers compete in the Iditarod alone. They have no crews waiting at the checkpoints to help them feed and care for their dogs. Most mushers will feed their dogs and make straw beds for them even before they feed themselves. So what would cause someone to brave temperatures as low as negative 51 degrees Celsius or negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit, strong winds, blowing snow, wild animals, and treacherous ice, all on very little sleep? The winner's prize of $50,000 or more may be an incentive, but most do it for the challenge, for the love of the sport, and the love of their dogs. Most participants are thrilled simply to finish the race. The dogs. The Iditarod is really about the dogs. The dogs who run the race, called huskies, have been specially bred to pull sleds the way collies have been bred to herd sheep. The sturdy, tough huskies can pull a sled carrying supplies and the musher a total weight of 136 to 182 kilograms, or 300 to 400 pounds. This may seem like a lot, but huskies love to pull. Huskies have also been bred to withstand extreme cold. They have 2 layers of fur. The outer layer, made of thick hairs, protects the dog from wind and water. The inner layer is a lot like a sheep's wool. It serves to insulate the body from cold temperatures and keep body heat from escaping. Some people even use husky hair to make warm hats and gloves. Huskies can't hide their enthusiasm. The dogs do not lose heat by sweating through their skin as humans do. Instead, they pant and they sweat through their feet. These adaptations allow huskies to run comfortably at temperatures below negative 51 degrees Celsius and negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you know? Often sled dogs on the Iditarod wear booties on their feet. The booties keep the dog's paws dry and prevent cuts from the sharp ice and rocks on the trail. A dog team can go through as many as 1,000 booties during an Iditarod. This can get pretty expensive, since the booties cost about 50 cents each. Huskies have also been bred to work as a team. This is important since the whole team must work together to pull the sled. An Iditarod team can have as many as 16 dogs. Usually an experienced lead dog runs at the front of the team and helps set the pace. Huskies are extremely friendly dogs, and like most dogs, they love to please their owners. Lead dogs are tough, enthusiastic, and experienced. A vet checks a resting husky. Care of the huskies before, during, and after the race is of utmost importance to the mushers and to the officials who run the Iditarod. Veterinarians wait at each checkpoint to examine the dogs as they come in. Dogs suffering from frostbite, exhaustion, or injury are pulled from the race. In fact, most mushers drop off one or more dogs that become tired or don't want to run anymore. There are 3 mandatory stops during the race to let the dogs rest. The first one, taken at the musher's choice of checkpoint, is 24 hours long. The other 2 are 8 hours long and are made at specific checkpoints. Mushers who mistreat their dogs are disqualified. The dogs eat a lot during the race to keep their energy high. One dog can consume up to 10,000 calories per day. The dogs' diets are rich in fat and protein from meat, pure fat, and dry dog food. They also need a lot of water, which the mushers warm up so that the dogs will not lose heat. The dogs typically eat 3 meals a day during rest, and they also get a lot of snacks on the trail. Like any athletic team, the dogs go through rigid training before the race. Sled dogs are trained to pull from the time they are puppies. Between September and February, before the Iditarod, teams make practice runs of up to 2,253 kilometers or 1,400 miles. They also compete in smaller races of 322 kilometers or 200 miles or more. In the end, the best trained team is usually the winner. The Iditarod is, above all, solitary. Conclusion. The Iditarod, also known as the Last Great Race, is a grueling competition between sled dog teams. They race across the Alaskan wilderness for 10 to 12 days for a more than $50,000 prize. Mushers come from around the world to compete. Journalists, TV networks, and newspaper reporters from across the globe come to cover the race, but it is not the money or the fame that attracts the mushers. The mushers do not really race their teams against one another. They race against the hardships of the wilderness and against themselves. Any musher will tell you that the true heroes of the Iditarod are the huskies who run almost 2,000 kilometers or 1,243 miles over some of the harshest, most beautiful land on earth. Explore more. Glossary.